I'm Claire Mercer, 32 years old, and 6 weeks ago I sat across a mahogany conference table and signed my name on 11 pages that handed my husband everything we'd built together. The company he'd put on magazine covers, the house with the wraparound porch I'd painted myself on a Saturday in October, the joint accounts, the car, all of it. My attorney grabbed my wrist under the table and whispered, "Don't do this." His mother straightened in her seat across the room and let herself smile for the first time all morning. And Marcus, the man I'd believed in before he even believed in himself, leaned back in his chair like a man who'd just closed the deal of his life. That smile lasted exactly 43 seconds. That's how long it took for the other attorney in the room to flip to Schedule C of the asset disclosure and realize what Marcus had just agreed to. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 4 years. To the night everything actually started. Marcus and I met in college, married at 27, and by the time I turned 29, I had left a 6-figure engineering job at a software firm in Dallas to help him build ServSync from a pitch deck and a half-written business plan. The idea was his, the code was mine. That distinction matters more than I knew then. ServSync was a scheduling and workforce platform for mid-sized restaurants. Marcus had the vision, the pitch, the handshake. He could walk into a room and make people believe something existed before it did. That was genuinely his gift, and for a long time I loved him for it. While he was out building relationships, raising seed rounds, and getting quoted in Forbes regional editions, I was home with our daughter Emma and a laptop, writing the architecture that made everything actually work. We had an agreement. He handles the business development. I build the product. When the company takes off, we take off together. He said that to me on a Tuesday evening in our kitchen over takeout, and I believed him the way you believe someone when you're still young enough to think love and honesty live in the same house. Emma was 4 when I first noticed the distance. Not the kind that comes from exhaustion or stress, which we had plenty of, but a different kind. The kind that has a direction. Marcus started staying later in the city. Conferences started requiring hotel rooms even when the venue was 40 minutes from our front door. He upgraded his wardrobe without mentioning it. I found a dry cleaning receipt in his coat pocket for a blazer I'd never seen him wear. I didn't confront him. I want to be honest about that. Part of me was afraid of what he'd say, and another part of me, the quieter part, was already thinking 3 steps ahead. The night I understood how serious it was, Emma had a fever. I texted Marcus at 9:30 asking when he'd be home. He responded 2 hours later, a single word: late. I sat beside Emma's bed, listening to her breathe, and made a decision that had been forming in me for longer than I'd admitted. I was going to find out exactly where I stood. Not emotionally, legally. There's something people don't know about me. Something Marcus had conveniently forgotten even though I'd told him clearly enough. Before we got married, before ServSync existed as anything more than a napkin sketch, I had already filed 3 provisional patents. Core architecture, the scheduling algorithm, the predictive staffing module. I filed them personally, in my own name, because Marcus and I weren't engaged yet and I was protecting work I'd done on my own time. When ServSync incorporated, Marcus assumed those patents transferred automatically to company ownership. He never asked me to sign an IP assignment agreement. His first attorney, a generalist who did mostly contract work, either missed it or assumed it had been handled. I never corrected the assumption. I want to be careful here because some people will hear that and think I was being deceptive from the beginning. I wasn't. At 28, newly married and genuinely excited, I intended to formalize everything eventually, but eventually kept getting pushed. There was always a funding round, a product launch, a crisis to manage, and somewhere in those 4 years, as I watched Marcus take meetings I wasn't invited to and sign deals he summarized for me in 2 sentences, I stopped pushing for eventually. 2 years before Marcus asked for a divorce, I called my college roommate Kate. Kate had gone to law school after we graduated, and now handled intellectual property cases for a boutique firm in Austin. We'd stayed close the way you stay close with someone who knew you before you became whoever you became. I have a question, I told her. More of a hypothetical. Those are always my favorite, she said. I explained the patents, the non-assignment, ServSync's valuation, which by then had crossed $8 million on paper. Kate was quiet for a long moment. Claire, she said carefully, are you telling me the core IP of an $8 million company is still registered in your personal name? I am. Another silence. Then, does Marcus know? He's never asked. Kate told me to come to her office the following week. She reviewed the original filings, the incorporation documents, ServSync's cap table, and 4 years of product development history that I had meticulously documented in version-controlled repositories. I'd been careful to back up to my own personal cloud storage from the very beginning. What she told me was this. Without those 3 patents, ServSync was a brand, a client list, and a sales team. The actual product, the thing investors had paid for, the thing restaurants in 12 states were running their operations on, that lived in my name. So what do? I asked. Kate looked at me the way she used to look at me when we were 19, and I was about to make a decision she thought I'd regret. Depends, she said. What do you want? I told her I didn't know yet, but I wanted to understand exactly where I stood before someone else decided for me. That conversation was the beginning of 2 years of very quiet preparation. I opened a personal business account at a credit union Marcus had no connection to. I began documenting everything: development logs, commits, timestamps, communications. I had Kate review the patents and confirm they remained valid and fully in my name. I did nothing dramatic, nothing visible. I just made sure that when the moment came, I would understand what was mine. The moment came on a Sunday morning in March. Emma was at a birthday party. Marcus sat down across from me at the kitchen table with the expression he used for performance reviews. I want a divorce, he said. I've been seeing someone. I think we both know this has been over for a while. I set down my coffee. Who is she? Jade. She works in marketing. She's 26. Of course she is. And the house? Marcus folded his hands on the table. I want to keep the house and the company. You can have primary custody of Emma. I'll pay child support. Reasonable amount. Nothing extravagant. You're a good engineer. You'll land somewhere. I'd like a moment to think, I said. He looked surprised, not sad, just surprised. Sure, take a few days. I waited until he left for the gym and then I called Kate. He just did it, I told her. I know, she said, and her voice carried something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but wasn't far from it. I've been waiting for this call. Meet me Monday. I need you to understand what the next 6 months looked like from the outside. Because the outside was the only version anyone around us saw. Marcus told his friends the story first, the way people who are used to controlling the narrative always do. I heard it secondhand through a woman I'd thought was also my friend, delivered with a sympathetic tilt of the head. Apparently Claire is being really difficult about the company. Marcus built that thing, you know. She did some tech work, but she was never really part of the business side. She's just trying to take what isn't hers. Some tech work. Marcus's mother, Patricia, called me on a Wednesday afternoon. She had the particular warmth of a woman who had always considered me a temporary inconvenience made permanent by a grandchild. Claire, she said, Marcus tells me you're planning to fight him on ServSync. I hope you'll reconsider. That company is his life's work. You know that. I know a lot of things, Patricia. She paused. You got a good life from that company. A house, stability. You should be grateful, not greedy. I thanked her for her concern and hung up. Jade reached out once. A text, carefully worded. Friendly in the way that only people who know they've done something wrong try to be. Hey, I know this is weird, but I just wanted to say I hope we can all be adults about this for Emma's sake. I read it, set my phone face down on the counter, and went back to the deposition outline I was reviewing with Kate. The pressure built steadily. Marcus's attorney sent formal letters. Marcus sent emails that I forwarded to Kate without responding. His friends stopped including me in group texts. Emma's preschool teacher gave me a look of such concentrated pity one afternoon at pickup that I had to sit in my car for 5 minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. But here's what I understood that none of them did. I wasn't delaying because I was scared or stalling because I had no options. I was waiting because timing is everything, and the moment Marcus signed that settlement agreement, his options were going to change permanently. Kate had spent those 6 months preparing the most specific and unambiguous settlement document I'd ever seen. Marcus would receive full ownership of ServSync LLC, including all registered assets, client contracts, operating agreements, bank accounts, and business goodwill. He would receive the house, both vehicles registered in the marriage, and all joint investment accounts. In exchange, I would receive primary custody of Emma, a standard child support arrangement, my personal savings account, my personal laptop, and my grandmother's jewelry. That was it. Nothing else. The IP assignment, or rather the absence of one, was not mentioned anywhere in the settlement. Marcus would receive ServSync, believing he was receiving the whole company. He had never run an IP audit. His current attorney, an aggressive litigator named David Holt who billed at $800 an hour, had sent us lengthy letters about marital asset division, but had somehow not conducted the one search that would have changed everything. Kate had a theory about why. Sometimes the attorneys who look the most intimidating, she told me, are also the ones most used to winning before they start. They stop looking for surprises. She was right. The settlement signing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at David Holt's firm downtown. Glass Tower, 14th floor. The kind of office designed to make the opposing party feel small before anyone said a word. I wore a blazer I'd owned for 3 years, and my grandmother's ring, a small pearl on a thin gold band, and I sat down across from Marcus and his attorney feeling calmer than I had any right to be. David Holt slid the document across the table. My client has been more than reasonable here, he said. This is a clean resolution. I looked at the cover page. Kate sat beside me, her pen uncapped, her expression giving nothing away. Marcus was looking at me with the careful neutrality of someone who had been coached. But underneath it, I could see what he expected. Relief, maybe. Or defeat. The particular combination of emotions that crosses a person's face when someone they've underestimated finally accepts the terms. I picked up the pen and signed each page where the tabs marked my name. When I finished, I set the pen down flat on the table and folded my hands. Marcus exhaled. David Holt began organizing the executed copies. A paralegal in the corner started typing. It had the feeling of aftermath. Then Kate slid a single envelope across the table. What's this? David Holt looked at it without touching it. Courtesy notification, Kate said. Under 35 U.S.C. Section 261, patent ownership is determined by written assignment. In the absence of a written assignment, patents remain the property of the named inventor. She paused to let that land. The core IP underlying ServSync's product suite, patents 741, 742, and 743, were filed by my client personally in 2019 and were never formally assigned to ServSync, LLC, or to the marital estate. That documentation is in the envelope. The room went very quiet. David Holt opened the envelope. I watched his eyes move across the first page. Then he stopped. He turned to the second page. His jaw tightened. What does that mean? Marcus asked. He was looking at his attorney, not at me. David Holt closed the envelope and set it on the table in front of him. It means, he said slowly, the words coming out like something he genuinely did not want to say out loud. The product is not owned by the company. Marcus's head turned toward me so fast it was almost involuntary. Claire, what did you do? I did what you asked, I said. I gave you the company. You gave me the shell. His voice was rising. You knew. You knew this whole time. Kate's voice was even. Mr. Mercer, the patents were filed in 2019, before your marriage. They were never assigned. That's a matter of public record. Anyone running due diligence would have found it. You should have done an IP audit, David Holt said, and there was something in his tone that sounded almost like he was talking to himself. Why didn't you? Marcus said to his attorney. His voice had gone tight in a way I recognized. It was the voice he used when something had gone wrong and he needed someone else to absorb the blame. Why didn't you check this? David Holt had no answer. Or rather, he had an answer, but it wasn't one he could give in front of a client. Marcus turned back to me. You planned this. His voice cracked on the last word. 4 years. You were planning this. I gave you exactly what you asked for, Marcus. I said it the same way I'd rehearsed it in front of my bathroom mirror at midnight when Emma was asleep and my hands were shaking from something that wasn't fear. The house, the accounts, the company, Every single thing you told me you built. I let you have it. He stared at me. The conference room felt very small. Without those patents, Kate continued, the company's current customers are operating on technology they have licensed, implicitly, from the original inventor. That license has not been formalized. My client is prepared to offer ServSync a fair licensing agreement going forward. However, any future investment, acquisition, or sale of the company will require her signature. Marcus stood up. He put both hands flat on the table and leaned toward me, and I made myself sit perfectly still. You think this is over? You think I won't fight this? You're welcome to fight it, Kate said. But you just signed a full settlement agreement on the marital estate. The patents were never part of that estate because they were never marital property. There's nothing to contest here. He looked at me the way someone looks when they realize the game was never the one they thought they were playing. I want to say I felt triumphant. Sitting in that conference room, watching Marcus understand what had happened, I thought I would feel something enormous. Instead, I felt hollow and very tired. The way you feel at the end of a long drive when you finally stop the engine and the silence is louder than the road was. I wasn't glad he was suffering. I was just finished. I gathered my copies, stood up, and followed Kate out. From the elevator lobby, I heard his voice carry through the glass wall. I couldn't make out words, but I heard the pitch of it, the same tone he used in negotiations when he felt the room shifting away from him. I didn't look back. Kate and I walked out into the March morning, into the particular clean light that comes after a cold front passes through Austin. She stopped on the sidewalk and looked at me. You okay? Yes, I said, and meant it. She smiled and shook her head slowly. I want you to know, she said, in 4 years of IP litigation, that is the cleanest thing I have ever seen. I pulled my jacket tighter. I didn't want to be clever. I just wanted out. The next few months arrived in fragments the way aftermath always does. I heard things through Kate, through the occasional message from a friend who was still genuinely my friend, through the particular way news travels in a city where everyone knows someone who knows you. ServSync's Series B round, which Marcus had been weeks away from closing, fell apart when the lead investor's legal team ran due diligence and discovered the IP situation. $8 million in committed funding, gone. 2 of the 3 senior engineers resigned within a month. Jade left before the funding collapsed. From what I heard from someone who worked in the same building as Marcus's new apartment, she texted him that she hadn't signed up for this and needed to focus on her career. I didn't feel any satisfaction about that either. I felt a kind of flatness that I later recognized, in therapy, as the absence of a feeling I'd been carrying for so long I hadn't noticed its weight. Marcus and I agreed to the licensing arrangement Kate had proposed. He still operates ServSync. He still goes to conferences and tells the story of building a company from nothing, and I imagine he believes it more than he used to, now that there's more at stake. The royalties from the licensing agreement go into a college fund I set up for Emma. I want to stop here for a moment, if that's all right, because there's something I've been thinking about how to say. There are people watching this right now who are in the middle of something that feels impossible. Not necessarily a divorce, not necessarily a business dispute, but something where the person who's supposed to be on your side has decided your contribution doesn't count. Where your name is on nothing and you're being told you built nothing. Where staying quiet feels like losing and speaking up feels like picking a fight you can't win. I stayed quiet for 2 years. Not because I was weak. Not because I was afraid of Marcus or his attorney or his mother's phone calls. I stayed quiet because I understood something that took me a long time to learn. You can't fight someone on their terms and expect to win. You have to find the ground where you're already standing. That means understanding what you actually have. Not what you deserve. Not what would be fair. But what is legally and demonstrably yours. I was lucky because what was mine was on paper, in a patent office database, time-stamped years before anyone thought to look. Not everyone has that. But most people have more than they think they do. If you're in that place right now, the place where someone is telling you to accept less than you're worth, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Every situation is different. Every relationship. Every legal system. Every family. What I will tell you is this. The quietest room is not always the emptiest one. Sometimes it's the one where someone has already won and is waiting for the other side to figure it out. If this story means something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're still with me, let me know in the comments. Have you ever held something back until the right moment? Have you ever been told your work didn't matter? I read every comment. I'll see you down there. Now let me tell you how things look today, because the ending isn't what I expected. Emma turned 6 in July. We had a small party in the backyard of the apartment I'd rented near her school. The kind of party with mismatched balloons and grocery store cake and 7 small children running across a lawn that was technically too small for 7 small children. She wore a purple crown and ate 2 pieces of cake and fell asleep in the car on the way back from picking up her cousin, her face still faintly smudged with frosting. I went back to engineering full-time in April, remote work for a firm that builds healthcare scheduling software. My manager told me in my first review that my eye for architecture was exceptional. I didn't explain that I'd spent 4 years writing production code at midnight while my daughter slept and my husband took calls in the driveway. I started therapy in February. Not because I was falling apart, but because Kate mentioned that her clients who navigated major legal fights without processing them afterward tended to carry it differently than the ones who talked it through. My therapist is a practical woman in her 50s who doesn't accept what she calls narrative framings that let people off the hook. She told me early on that the reason I'd spent 2 years building a quiet exit instead of confronting Marcus directly was worth understanding, not just as strategy, but as a pattern. I've been working on that. Marcus and I have a custody arrangement that works most of the time. He picks Emma up every other weekend and every Wednesday evening. He takes her to soccer now. He showed up to her first game in October and stood on the sideline looking like a man who had recently discovered that showing up was a thing he could do. Emma ran over to him at halftime and grabbed his hand, and I watched from across the field and felt something complicated that I'm still sorting out. Not forgiveness exactly. Not its absence either. Something more like the recognition that the story isn't finished, and that's all right. He texted me in September, not about Emma. Just a message that said, "I know you were smarter than I gave you credit for. I'm sorry it took me this long to understand that." I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and watched Emma practice her penalty kicks in the backyard and decided I didn't need to respond right away. Some things can sit for a while before you answer them. My grandmother's ring is on my right hand now, moved there a week after the signing. It fits better there anyway. The pearl catches the light on certain mornings in a way that makes Emma ask if it's magic. I tell her it belonged to someone who knew a lot and said very little, and that those are 2 of the most useful things a person can be. What I understand now that I couldn't have articulated 2 years ago is this. The people who take everything from you and think they've won are operating on a version of the story they wrote themselves. They don't account for what they don't know, you know. They don't look for what they've assumed is already theirs. And while they're busy celebrating, you have time to make sure that when the settlement lands, every word means exactly what you intend. I'm not telling you my way is the right way. I'm not telling you patience is always the answer, or that quiet preparation is a strategy available to everyone in every situation. Sometimes you need to fight loudly and immediately, and that is its own kind of courage. But if you have the ground and the time, and you know what's yours, and someone is so certain they've already won that they've stopped looking closely at the documents in front of them, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is hand them exactly what they asked for. Let them have the house. Let them have the company. Let them have the name on the door and the car in the garage, and the satisfaction of believing they outsmarted you. And walk out of that conference room carrying the 3 patents that make the whole thing work. That's it. That's the whole story. If you made it to the end, thank you for being here. My name is Claire, and I hope wherever you are, whatever room you're in right now, you know what's actually yours. You might be surprised how much that turns out to be.